Hello, my name is Chad Thompson. This is a capstone presentation for Unity College, Spring 20-2. This is Mapping Wild Rice Restoration at Tawas Lake, East Tawas, Michigan. This project is planned for the summer of 2020. I'm going to start June 1st and present my final product to the partners at the end of July. Partners for this project include Barb Barton, the author of Monoman, the story of wild rice in Michigan. She's also an endangered species consultant. I'm also partnering with the Native Wild Rice Coalition. Years ago, the Native Americans of northeast Michigan harvested the wild rice in the lakes and used the rice beds as cover for duck hunting. This is true of Tawas Lake in Iosco County, adjacent to the towns of East Tawas and Tawas City. As people began to settle along the lake use has shifted to more recreation, and many people wanted these weeds, as they called them, gone. The city and county allowed for acres of the wild rice and other vegetation to be removed and even sprayed with pesticides. For years, many duck hunters have tried to preserve the wild rice. In 2007, the Native Wild Rice Coalition began heavy efforts to stop removal and expand conservation of the wild rice at East Tawas. In 2017, the Saginaw Chippewa tribe purchased 32 acres at the lake in efforts to restore the lake's wild rice and in order for them to increase their harvest in the fall. The tribe described the purchase as culturally significant, and it reclaimed land that were once part of their lands and then were ceded to them in treaties and territories. This project will map the wild rice restoration by looking at the rice and the vegetation on Tawas Lake. The project will use historic satellite imagery, land use and land change analysis, cluster analysis, and it will also examine the normalized difference vegetation index conversion that is used on maps to see the changes in wild rice across the project area. This project will be available as a story map to the general public, showing the changes over time and mapping the expansion and constriction of the species as local laws and conservation efforts have changed over the years. I would like to use this project to address the question, have the conservation efforts to create a sustainable wild rice population actually been successful? We have satellite data before the conservation efforts took place and before any laws were implemented. I would like to compare these to the ones that we currently have to see if the practices have actually been successful. Success of the conservation efforts will be predefined by the partners and will include a numerical value showing a net gain or a net loss of vegetation across the area. This project has been centered around Tawas Lake, a popular tourist website for the state of Michigan, Michigan Water Trails, describes this lake as one that is located on the north end of the city of East Tawas. It's one of the areas as a hotspot for pan fishing and pike fishing. It's also a favorite among local duck and geese hunters, with a mix of duck, geese, swan, and the occasional bald eagle sighting thrown around. Tawas Lake is very popular to local birders and wildlife enthusiasts as well. This is a great description of the lake. However, it fails to mention anything about the cultural significance of the rice on the lake, nor does it mention the conservation efforts that have taken place for the past few years to preserve the wild rice on the lake. Wild rice was once a thriving part of the wetlands and the lake ecosystem in this part of Michigan. But during the colonial expansion and logging, the species was almost eliminated. Conservation efforts by the native tribes, local fishermen, hunters, and others have started to restore the wild rice to its historic role. Efforts are working, and some tracts of water along the lake are starting to show growth of the species. But more needs to be done, and efforts can be greatly improved if local communities and visitors to the lake and the region will do their part in sustainable conservation efforts. The problem is that many do not know there is culturally any significance going on with the wild rice. There needs to be more education to take place for people to understand that the wild rice is there and why it needs to be restored to its full historical significance. This project will help serve as a tool to measure the success of the wild rice conservation and the restoration efforts. The public tool will not only inform conservationists of the measures of their own efforts, but it will also serve as an easy way to let everyone else living in the area or visiting the area to see the success of the project. This project is planned to help spread the knowledge of the significance that is going on of the wild rice, the significance of the people, to help everyone understand the conservation efforts, and will also help promote the sustainable practices by those who learn about these efforts as they use the lake. All maps will be displayed in an interactive, user-friendly story map. This will have a historic narrative of the area, and it will have a story of the rice highlighted within each and every map page. The final product will be available on mobile-friendly versions for phones, tablets, as well as a computer-based story map. It's the goal of this project that we will have the final story map deliverable available for web page use so that it can be added into the Native Wild Rice Coalition's web page, as well as some of the county web pages to be used for tourism and for local involvement. With the help of the partners, this project should be finished in time for the fall wild rice camps, which happen in late August, early September. These wild rice camps teach traditional harvesting, and they tell the migration story of how rice helped to bring the Native Americans into the Great Lakes region and why it was important for their development. The final project is proposed to be finished and presented by July 19th of 2020. I proposed 9 special reporting meetings with the partners over the course of the project. Each report will highlight a special portion of the project and allow time for any changes that need to be made along the way and any changes made from peer feedback. These include, but are not limited to, reports showing the Landsat images that have been collected over time, reports of the history of the rice, the tribes, and the lake data that will be available on the story map. This will be a report showing the narrative for the conservation and the sustainability efforts along the way. I would also like to present story narratives for review showing what a story map will look like, what a final product could potentially look like. I'd like to give a review showing vegetation changes, maps that have taken place, historic and present NDVI maps. I would like to show some census data and land use change and present this to the people before it gets added into the final project. Finally, as part of the last phases, I'd like to present the final format of the story map and the online format to the partners. Let them review the final phases before we present the final map and the final ending products. This project is divided into 5 component parts. Each part will not be completed at one time, but instead are going to take place throughout the period of 8 weeks. All aspects fall into the 5 categories: research, report to the partners, satellite imagery, GIS processing, and story map design. Details about these are presented on these slides. Thank you for taking the time to review my final project proposal. I am open to hearing any new ideas for the project. Please feel free to contact me at mthompson18@unity.edu. Thank you again.